Hello, I'm Alan Sinclair. Welcome to South Today. In tonight's programme, a man convicted of murdering a student 16 years ago is preparing a third appeal after two prosecution witnesses retract their evidence.
I regretted the day I was stood up in that court and told lies.
Omar Benguit's family say their fight for justice will continue.
My brother's innocent, completely innocent of this. He was stitched up, good and proper.
The family of a man jailed for murdering a student in Bournemouth 16 years ago is planning a fresh appeal after two of the key witnesses at his trial retracted their statements. Omar Benguit was found guilty of the murder, but his family has always protested his innocence. Young Ok Shin, known as Oki, died after being stabbed in the back as she walked home after a night out in 2002. It wasn't until January 2005, after 3 trials, that Omar Benguit was convicted of her murder. Since then, he's twice had appeals rejected. Now, 2 witnesses have told a BBC documentary team they felt pressurised by the police to identify Omar Benguit as the murderer. Dorset Police denies those allegations and says it fully supports the officers involved. Our Home Affairs correspondent Peter Cook is in Bournemouth tonight. So, Peter, fresh questions over this conviction.
Alan, yes, on the one hand you have the documentary which raises questions about the safety of this conviction, and Omar Benguit's family who say the information gives them an opportunity to launch a third appeal. On the other, you have Dorset Police who stand by the investigation. Now, the case has never gone away and will provide some sharp focus for this force in the months ahead.
Omar Benguit was a dangerous man, a drug addict and violent criminal who a judge warned would one day kill someone. In 2002, the police were convinced he'd done exactly that, stabbing student Young Ok Shin in the back as she made her way home from a night out, something to this day he still denies.
Why should I believe that you didn't do this, Omar?
If I would have admitted it now, yeah, right, I'd have 4 years left, yeah? I'd rather die in jail, I'd rather be carried in a box saying I didn't do it than say I did do it and go home today.
He was convicted on the evidence of more than a dozen witnesses, many of them heavy drug users, but no forensics connected him to the murder scene and no weapon was ever found. Now a new BBC documentary's heard from 2 of those witnesses who've retracted the evidence they gave at his third trial and say they lied in court. One was a former friend of Omar's, Leanne Myers, who's currently serving 12 years in prison for robbery. Her mother recounted what Leanne had told her years after the final trial.
The knife thing here, she said the police kept saying to her, are you sure you didn't see a knife that was so-and-so inches long and with a such and such blade? And she said, no, that's completely, it's not what I saw. She said, but they just kept on and on. You know, there was just a lot of pressure, I think, on her to conform.
The other witness, Joan Sheridan, used to run a crack house in Bournemouth and now has signs of dementia, but her family said she was fit to be interviewed. She says she told the police what they wanted to hear.
How do you feel now, knowing that you
Helped to put a man in prison? I feel terrible. I feel disgusted in myself. You know what I mean? Someone should not be locked up for something they never done. I regretted the day I ever stood up in that court and told lies.
The documentary also found the police had serious concerns about the credibility of their main witness and her history of making false claims, concerns that were never shared with the jury at Omar's trials. Years later, she changed her story about what she'd seen on the night of the murder. During 2 appeals, Omar Benguit's family also claimed serial killer Danilo Restivo could have been the real murderer. Just 4 months after Oki's death, Restivo killed his neighbour Heather Barnett in Bournemouth. It later emerged he'd murdered 16-year-old Elisa Claps in Italy in 1993. But appeal judges dismissed both the concerns about the key witnesses' credibility and that Danilo Restivo was a likely suspect for Oki's murder. Now armed with new evidence, Omar Benguit's family are planning a new appeal.
Just talk me through how you felt when you saw that footage of what those 2 witnesses had said.
I just broke down. I just broke down because it's something that I have been searching for almost 16 years. And to actually see it and hear it, I broke down.
Amy claims witnesses were pressurised by the police into pointing the finger of blame at her brother.
I used to be very angry with the witnesses, and now I actually feel sorry for them. They were used for this case.
And she remains convinced the real killer thinks they've got away with murder.
What today is justice for you in the future?
Just the truth to come out. Justice, not just for my brother, justice for the victim. I mean, there are two families here that have suffered, and they both deserve justice.
Well, Dorset police say they carried out a thorough and professional investigation, that the conviction was tested twice at the Court of Appeal and upheld on both occasions, and no allegations of wrongdoing by any officers were made during those appeals. But if, and it is a very big if, this proves to be a miscarriage of justice, it will be one of the biggest in British legal history. Alan.
Peter Cook, thank you. Well, Brona Munro, the investigative journalist who worked on this series, is with me in the studio now. Brona, tell us a bit more about the strength of the prosecution case which convicted Omar.
Well, in the early days after the murder, Dorset police struggled to pick up a lead, and it was only when a sex worker and addict came forward with the story of the night that they made a breakthrough. This witness, known as BB, formed the main prosecution case against Omar, and it's her evidence that I have serious concerns around. She failed in the early stages to name the three men responsible for the murder. She changed that. She then changed the location of the murder, and she never conclusively said what car she was driving on that night. Now, I tracked down a jury member from the third trial, and she told me that she was concerned about the reliability of BB's evidence and that she was surprised that she was a witness at the trial. We also found in internal police documents evidence that BB had a history of making false allegations of paedophilia against a neighbour and false allegations against the witness protection officers.
But she was one of only 12 significant witnesses in the police case. Surely they had substantial evidence otherwise?
On the face of it, yes. Now, we've established that 2 of these witnesses are potentially dead, and I tracked down 8 other witnesses, all who lived chaotic lives back then and dropped out of society. Now, when I tracked them down and spoke to them, their stories were glaringly inconsistent with BB's story of that night. They didn't match what she had told the court. Now, back then, these addicts had serious drug problems and heavy addictions, and I believe it was this addiction that left them vulnerable and susceptible to telling people what they thought they wanted to hear about Omar. None of the memories that they had of Omar or his behaviour convinced me that they happened on the night of the murder. Off the back of that, if my brother had been convicted on the words of the addicts that I spoke to, I would be seriously disillusioned with that conviction.
Brona Munro, thank you very much indeed. And all episodes of Unsolved, The Man with No Alibi, are available now on BBC Three or the iPlayer. And the first episode is on BBC One this Thursday at 10:45.